Hey everybody, welcome back this week as we walk through the Word together. And as we walk out this truth, we discover that life is produced in us and also in other people. We are walking with one another, growing together to see the life of Christ continue to manifest and birth in us, and then to see it spread outside of the walls of our houses and our church buildings.
I want to talk to you. The subject tonight is when troubles come. When troubles come. And we're going through the life of Jesus, right? We're not here very much. We're in our mission work most of the time. But when we're here, we love the fact that our church is going through the life of Jesus. So open your Bibles to Luke chapter 6. And we'll start with verse 11. And while you're going there, let me just tell you what's going on here as we begin to read. Jesus is breaking the rules and making the religious self-righteous leaders really mad. And then he really broke the worst rule and he called himself Lord. I mean, he's either Lord or he's a liar now, right? And so now things are not going well for people who were in these religious positions. So in Luke chapter 6, verse 11, it says this, but they were filled with fury. Can you imagine being filled with fury at Jesus? Wow. And they discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. Now, this is the halfway point of his ministry, all right? It's been a year and a half, and now all hell is aligning against him. So what does he do when all hell lines against him? We are Christians. I hate the word Christian. Isn't that terrible? I hate the word. I don't use the word. Nobody knows what it means anymore. In some countries, it's a political party. I don't follow anybody named Christ. I think there's a comedian by that name. I'm not a follower of him. I'm a follower of Christ. So if I'm going to say it, it's going to be Christian, all right? I'm a follower of Christ. Give me a little Christ. That's what I want to be. But what does Jesus do? Because we want to do what he does when all hell is against him. Well, he goes to be with his Father first. So the triune God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are meeting together in verse 12. In these days, he went out to the mountain to pray, and all night he continued in prayer to God. And what he does next is not what we would generally do next. He gets the most messed up people you could possibly find and says, you guys are going to represent the one that holds the whole universe together. And here it is in verse 13. When day came, he called his disciples. There were lots of disciples, but he only called 12 that he called apostles. And from them chose 12, whom he named apostles. Simon, whom he named Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot. He was a rebel. He was a government protester. And Judas, the son of James. There were two Judases. And Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. So he gathers together these folks who he's going to send out to represent him. And then with all hell coming against him, all heaven breaks loose. Verse 17, and he came down with them, and he stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured, and all the crowds sought to touch him, for power came out from him and healed them all. Now, I want to tell you something. I may be wrong. I'm not inerrant. The Bible is. I'm not. But I prayed a long time about this message. I preach messages over and over again, often, because I preach all over the world. But I've never preached this one, probably never will again in this way. I believe God gave me this word for this time, for this church. And here's what I think he's saying to me. I think what we see happening here is happening in this church. I believe all heaven is beginning to break loose. But you need to understand that when that happens, all hell will be aligned against you. And so troubles are going to come. We've heard the stories of some of them today, heartbreaking stories of anxiety and fear and all of these things. I don't understand this. I've lived a long time, followed Jesus a long time, been a Christian a long time. I don't understand it, but I got to tell you, the people that God uses greatest are often the people that hurt the most. And maybe it's just so we don't live in our pride and our arrogance. I don't understand it. Listen, if you ever come to me and say, hey, you're in missions, I want to be a missionary, I'm going to do everything I can to talk you out of it. My son came to me and said, God's called me to ministry. I said, no, he's not. No, he's not. You don't want to do that. I'm telling you, you have no idea what it's going to be like. No idea the times of tears and pain. No idea all the people that say, I got your back. And they had a sword in their hand or a knife. I said, and he said, but you want me to do what you want or what God wants? I said, oh, great. Thanks for preaching to me, you know. And he's in ministry now, and he's doing a great job, and I love him. But listen, I'm just telling you, if you came to Jesus to make everything fine in your life, you've come to the wrong place. If you want to see the powerful movement of the Spirit of God, it's likely going to come through pain and troubles. The good news is that God will take you through those things. He won't meet you on the other side of them. My friend Gary, I mentioned, his wife was martyred. I've been his friend since just about the day after it happened. He said, you know, I love so much the 23rd Psalm, where the Lord doesn't say, I'm going to meet you on the other side. But he says, when I'm in the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. You are with me. One of my favorite quotes, I think it'll come up on the screen, from a guy named A.W. Tozer. It's doubtful whether God can bless someone greatly until he wounds him deeply. It's doubtful. Is that going to come up? I think it will. It's doubtful that God, there we go, whether God can bless someone greatly until he wounds him deeply. In the last 4 or 5 days, I've got connections all over the world. I can tell you by number, there have been at least 340 of your brothers and sisters, 340 Christians who have been murdered in Syria, a country where I've done some significant work. Murdered simply because they love Jesus. 70 believers were found beheaded in their church building. Can you imagine if 70 people were beheaded in here? We don't deal with these things in our country. But in the Congo, just a couple of weeks ago, these are all recent things. We really believe the likelihood is in Syria and Afghanistan right now, it's not hundreds, it's thousands. Thousands of our brothers and sisters are being persecuted and hurting and in prison and tortured and dying all over the time. And you know who we have there? We have missionaries there trying to help them, but nobody's helping our missionaries. That's what my wife and I are a part of. Do you know that this church on Easter weekend is sending 7 people, because our ministry and our partner ministry is going to be caring for the souls of a group of missionaries who all of them are in Muslim countries. All of them are in danger, and nobody ever takes care of them. Nobody ever takes care of their kids. But our church is sending 7 people to the Middle East in as safe a place as we can find to care for those kids so that our ministry can do what it takes to keep the souls of these missionaries healthy so that they can support the ones who are under such persecution. But you know what? We still need 1 or 2. And if that's you, you meet us in the back, or just go to the table out there, and they're ready to help you know how you can be a part of that team. But this, I'm going to tell you, this sounds really sad and hard. Let me tell you the good news. We're in great spiritual awakening all over the world. All over the world. In Iran, we had just a few hundred believers just a couple decades ago. There's 5 million now. Every time you see on the news how terrible and evil Iran is, the government is terrible and evil. The people hate their government and love you. And so always remember, don't just take the news and believe everything you hear. There's 5 million. You know how they disciple people in Iran? They disciple them before they become Christians. Before they come to Jesus, they disciple them. They say, listen, if you come to Jesus, what Jesus said it'll mean is to take up a cross and follow him and die. Your old life dies, and the body you live in now may die and be killed. You'll probably go to prison. You may be tortured, but here's the deal. Jesus is Lord, and you've seen in me that he gives me joy you've never known before, even though I'm in and out of prison. If you want that joy, you can have it, but it may lead you to prison. And they're coming to Jesus left and right, and the government can't stop it. Troubles are coming. So I just want to ask you today, will you walk with Jesus into trouble? Because wherever Jesus goes, great things are happening. But it always goes through that gateway of trouble. This is another one of my favorite quotes. Archbishop of Canterbury years ago, he said this: everywhere the Apostle Paul went, there was either a riot or a revival. Everywhere I go, they serve tea. If you want in on the great move of God that is beginning in this nation, it's been all over the world now for some time. It's beginning in the generation of most of you. You got to decide. You're not interested in being where they're serving tea. You're interested in being where the enemy's going to try to bring a riot and the Spirit's going to bring revival. And that's where I believe God's taken this church. And all of you that want to go can be there. So what do we do? Well, let's do what Jesus did when troubles came. Let's do what Jesus did when troubles came. I love karaoke. Anybody else love karaoke? Vacation's not vacation to me if we can't sing karaoke. I just love it. And even my wife, who will tell you she doesn't sing much, the last time we did karaoke, actually sang a karaoke song with me. Maybe we should do it right now, Donna. No, we're not gonna do that. But no, maybe the next time. So last time we were in karaoke, this guy comes up and they say, okay, he's gonna sing You Raise Me Up by Josh Groban. And I'm going, oh no. Because it's a really hard song and nobody should sing that song unless they're a good singer. This guy was not a good singer, okay? And I'm listening to it, I'm going, oh, this is just painful. And this is the strangest thing. I'm sitting there and I just stopped and I started listening to the words even though they were sung horrifically. When I'm down and oh, my soul's so weary, when troubles come, and my heart burdened be, then I'm still and I wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. And sitting there at karaoke, I said, Lord, I know the topic that I'm to preach on Midtown. When troubles come, you raise me up so that I can stand on mountains. That's what Jesus did. He went to the mountain, then he brought his disciples with him. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I'm on your shoulders. You raise me up to be more than I can be. He'll do that. He'll do that. And what we're to do is just do what he did. So I'm not going to take real long this afternoon. But let me just tell you what I think we need to learn when troubles come. Number one, pursue the victor, not the victory. Pursue the victor, not the victory. The American church has been addicted to experience, addicted to a path that leads to our best life now, a path that leads to victory. It's not the way Jesus did it. It's not what he did. When all hell came against him, he didn't first go to people. He didn't first develop a committee to have a strategy to solve his problems. He first went to his Father and got alone with him all night long. Now, if Jesus needed that, I want to guarantee you that you need it. And I know that I sure need it. If you're lost in the wilderness, which do you want, a bad map or a wilderness guide? And any time that I'm in a crisis and I'm trying to figure it all out myself, I want to tell you right now, I'm making a bad map for myself. And what I need is a wilderness guide. Every day, learn what it means to say, Lord, you told me I could pray continuously. So I'm going to pray this morning. I'm going to pray tonight. But in the meantime, I'm just going to walk in prayer. I'm going to say, Lord, I need to hear your voice. I need to see what you're doing. Every day in the shower, try not to visualize that. It's terrifying. But in the shower, I have an early morning shower prayer. And the prayer is, Lord, in my flesh, I'm just a corrupt man. I will miss everything you're doing today. Help me to see with your eyes, hear with your ears, touch with your hands, walk with your feet. And when I do that and I'm full of the Spirit, amazing things happen. Amazing things. And when I don't, then I get my own stupid roadmap. And then when there's a critical time in my life, I literally go to the mountain. Jesus did it. We should. Come on, y'all. We live in the mountains. Why don't we use the mountains? So I don't know, it was a decade ago, and I was pastoring a church in this city, and I'm just going to be honest with you. It was one of the most painful times of our ministry. It was not going well. It was very, very hard. I won't go into all of the reasoning behind that. Part of it's just that I'm often just not a very good leader. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing. We weren't reaching young adults. We weren't reaching college students. I knew there were some things that just could not be accomplished in the walls of the big church where I was. And I really believe that even though there were all kinds of struggles and barriers we were facing, that we were to start something new. So I went to the mountain. I have a place called my Oasis. If you want to know where it is, I'm not going to tell you here because I don't want all of you going there. See, because I almost never see anybody, but I might tell you. I might tell you if you come out there and talk to me. And I went to the Oasis, and I'm all alone. It's 4 miles up in the Smokies, 8-mile round trip, 8.5 maybe. And I'm sitting there in this Oasis. There's 3 beautiful waterfalls, and this flat rock. And I'm just laying there on my face, and I'm crying out to God. And I stayed there all day long. It wasn't all night, but it was all day. And when I came back, I knew what to do. And nobody agreed with me. I mean, there may have been some people, but I didn't hear much of it. And I'm a team kind of leader, It's very rare for me to say, this is what we're going to do as a pastor. When I was a pastor, this is what we're going to do. But in this case, I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start this. It's going to be a campus of this church. Maybe one day God will make it a church of its own. And here's who the leader was going to be. And I named a young man. And I don't recall that anybody thought it was a good idea. The church was this one, and the young man was Jay Smith. And I know that God spoke to me because look at you. Look at us. Go to the mountain. Go to the mountain. Don't try to solve all the problem. Don't go chasing after victory. Just go to the victor and walk with him. Be intensely with God before you try to intensely manage your problems. And then second, choose chaotic community. Listen, church is not easy. Jay and I had lunch recently. We were talking about, I was a part of a revival movement, 30 years ago. And it's messy, it's hard. You make mistakes, you don't know what to do. What do you do? What do you not do? How do you do all this? But Jesus chose that. He chose these most messed up people, IRS, crooked, corrupt tax agents and radical government protesters, white collar folks, redneck folks. And I want to tell you, it didn't make any sense at all, really. I love this so much. I think it's going to come up on the screen in case you want to take a picture of it. This is an imaginary letter written to Jesus from the Jordan Management Consultants. Okay, here we go. Dear sir, thank you for submitting the resumes of the 12 men you have picked for managerial positions in your new organization. It is the staff opinion that most of your nominees are lacking in background education and vocational aptitude for the type of enterprise you're undertaking. Simon Peter is emotionally unstable and given to fits of temper. Andrew has absolutely no qualities of leadership. The two brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, place personal interest above company loyalty. Thomas demonstrates a questioning attitude that would tend to undermine morale. We feel it's our duty to tell you that Matthew has been blacklisted by the Greater Jerusalem Better Business Bureau. James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus definitely have radical leanings, and they both registered a high score on the manic depressive scale. One of the candidates, however, shows great potential. He's a man of ability and resourcefulness, meets people well, has a keen business mind, contacts in high places, highly motivated, ambitious, and responsible. We recommend Judas Iscariot as your controller and right-hand man. Sincerely, Jordan Management Consultants. So Jesus pulls together these people that are utterly unqualified in everybody's eyes except his and his Father's, and that just may be you. But you know what he didn't call them to do? He didn't call them to do anything alone. If you're here checking all this out and you've been trying to follow Jesus on your own, or you're not following him at all, you're just wandering out in the wilderness, let me tell you, there is no such thing in the Bible as a Christianity, as somebody that follows Jesus alone. You are called to community. It's messy. Listen, you hang around here long enough, you're going to get your feelings hurt. Someone's not going to do something you like. I'm just going to tell you, it's going to happen. Might happen today. You've got to decide, do you want to go at this on your own, or do you want to go with Jesus? You know what Jesus did in verse 17? He called them up to the mountain, and then he said, but guys, we're not staying here. And it says they came down with him to the place where Jesus was doing ministry. Will you come down with Jesus? Will you be willing not to just expect your Christian faith to be a mountaintop experience, but come on down with him? And then finally, keep the king and the kingdom first. Just keep the king and the kingdom first. When Jesus came down from the mountain with his apostles, he didn't take them to the Senate, to Caesar, to the Colosseum where all the entertainment was happening, because he had a bigger plan than that. He wanted to invade all of life, where all people live. So he comes to this crowd of hurting people and says, here we go. Here, there was nothing there to gain him power, control, or solve all the problems. It was just hurting people. And Jesus says, here it is. Here's what we are to be about. You know the number one goal of the enemy in your life, of our enemy. I love the early church way that Jay uses. Now, not many churches do it, but it's absolutely right. It's right according to the early church. They renounced Satan. You know the greatest attack of Satan on your life? All he wants you to do is make Jesus a part of your life. That's all he wants you to do. Just make Jesus a part of your life. Because if Jesus is a part of your life, you will never understand what it is to really be his follower. When you take up your cross and follow him and you're all in no matter what, you'll get disappointed with whatever Christianity is, and sooner or later you'll wander out the door and the devil will go, it's okay, it's okay. Jesus will always be a part of your life. If Jesus is not your life, you're not his follower yet. And I'm trying to make you feel guilty. I'm just saying there's a lot more that you may not yet know of what it means to be his. And the crazy thing about it is, I wrote a whole book on this called Authentic Power. The most joyful people in all the world are the most persecuted people in all the world. So if you choose to follow Jesus, and even when it's really hard, he's going to tell you there's no storm of this life that can blow you away, no flood that can wash you away. So what do you do to make the king and the kingdom first? Just do what he did with this crowd of people. Just heal hurts, battle evil, bless everyone. It's not that complicated. You want to judge? How are you doing right now as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus? You can read it for yourself. I could break it all down. I'm not going to take the time to do that. But in this passage, they healed hurts, they battled evil, and they blessed everyone. Just go do that and go do it together and watch what Jesus will do in you. It will be like nothing you've ever imagined in your life, and you'll never want anything less. And I'll finish with this. The biggest things God does, you know where they start? The biggest things God does start with ordinary people doing small things. I told you a little story about how some of this started, but let me actually tell you the year that this church started. Now, every church started in the year Jesus was crucified and rose, but let me tell you an event that happened that started this church, and nobody here but me knows this. It was 1716. Do you know that? 1716. And I'm going to introduce you to a man that in some ways started everything that's happening here today. And here's his picture, by the way. We don't have an actual picture, but here's the drawing of him. Count Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf. How many of you have ever heard that name before in your whole life? Raise your hand. There's a dozen of you, maybe. And what's really interesting is this is one of the most God-used men in history, and almost nobody knows his name, which is really shocking when you understand what he did. He was a teenager. He was younger than most of you in this room, and nobody around him really loved Jesus. The church was cold and dead, and it was about formality and political power. But this, as a young man, even as a child, he would write love letters to Jesus. People thought he was completely nuts. And then as a young teenager in school, he found a small group of people that said, you know what? Why don't we love Jesus together? And they formed a society. If you look it up online, you'll find that it's still around today. And it's called the Order of the Mustard Seed. They said, Jesus said if we just had just a little bit of faith, we don't see anybody with much faith. What if we just had a little bit? And they said, okay, if we're going to be a club, we got to have club rules. What are our rules? Here were their 3 rules. And I want to tell you, there wasn't any church they could find doing this. Number 1, to be consumed with Jesus. Number 2, to be kind to everyone. And number 3, to take the gospel to the whole world. And nobody was doing, there was no missionary movement. Nobody was doing this. And these were teenagers, and they became the first movement since the early church that was really the revived church, rebirthed according to New Testament revival. And they began to reach people. Things began to change. And then they said, okay, how are we going to go take the gospel to the world? And they met an escaped slave. And he said, I wish you could preach the gospel to our people. So they launched the first missionary movement to the slaves in the Western world. And they started taking in refugees into their community, left and right. And they said, man, we better pray. We better go to the mountain with Jesus. We can't do this on our own. And they started a prayer meeting in a place called Herrnhut. And people started saying, this went really well. Let's just keep praying. Let's not stop. Maybe we should do it 24/7. We could just have 2 people here for an hour or 2 and never stop praying. Do you know how long the prayer meeting lasted? It lasted 100 years. And it's being rebirthed in our day. And then this guy named John Wesley came to faith because of Zinzendorf, because of this dude right here. John Wesley met a guy named George Whitefield, and they were in school together, and they said, hey, let's form us a club too. They said, we're going to pray, we're going to do justice, and we're going to take the gospel to the world, just like Zinzendorf said. And through their leadership, a revival happened in the American colonies that we call the First Great Awakening. One of those men, George Whitefield, became what any historian will tell you, was really the first American celebrity. Everybody knew him. He preached all over this country. Thousands upon thousands came to Christ. And out of it came a new nation. Do you know what the battle cry of the Revolutionary War was? Most people don't. Secularism's tried to hide it. Everybody fighting for freedom knew the battle cry, no king but King Jesus. And it swept this nation. If I had time, I actually teach a course on this. I could take you through what happened for the next 200 years and how all of what Zinzendorf taught just covered this nation for 200 years. It would ebb and it would flow. But in the 1970s, God began a movement among young people and young adults in California, and it swept all across the nation until it reached Western North Carolina, and a young girl in high school got saved, and she invited this young man to come hear the gospel. And when I went and heard it, there was a preacher there like none I had ever heard, and it shook me to the core. And I made my way down to the front that day in the middle of that revival called the Jesus Movement. And I said to that man, I want what you just talked about. And he and another man led me to faith in Jesus. And one day on the phone, he said to me, I now want you to mentor my grandson the way I mentored you. I did his funeral last year. And that man was Ian Walker, and that young man, his grandson, is Jay Smith. Your pastor, our pastor, my pastor. 17, 16. One teenager says, golly, we ought to love Jesus. I mean, really love him, be true to him, be consumed by him. We ought to be kind to everyone. We ought to take the gospel to the world. And because of that, here you sit. So now you know why Midtown began in 1716 with the order of the mustard seed. And who knows what God might want to do next. And why not you? Why wouldn't you be the one with whom he begins? What do you think, Midtown? Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go follow Jesus. And be consumed by him, be kind to everybody, take the gospel to the world. Lord, I pray you'd do that. I pray, Lord, you would raise up people right now who are so fired up for you. It goes beyond emotion. They're not looking for an experience. They're looking for you, for a person, for a relationship. And Lord, that what we've experienced today will just be the beginning of what you're going to do next. And if you tarry long enough, maybe in 100 years or 200 years, there'll be people we can't even imagine who will look back to what you're doing right here now. Lord, you may come this week, but until you come, send us after you, knowing that even when troubles come, you'll make those troubles the very pathway to walk into revival. And that's our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.